Hi everybody, it's Greg Roark, Director of STEM Education here at Redbird Flight Simulations, and congratulations on your purchase of a TD or a TD2. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the little finer points about how to assemble your TD and TD2, as well as walking you through some of the troubleshooting elements that we go through here to help customers like yourself. So with that, let's take a look at where it all started. So I found the lower unit that is going to be screwed onto the table here. So that's going to be the first thing that I mount. Everything else gets mounted to that. I have found it. It's usually in this lower brown box that you'll find here. Again, take pictures of everything, all of the different things that come with it. You're going to have instructions that are going to come with it, power cables, other types of keyboard, for instance, speakers, things like that. And you can just set those aside for now because we'll plug everything else in at the end. But that's the first thing I'm going to do, is to set this lower unit up here. So with that, I'm going to reach around here. I'm going to grab this. It's not that heavy, but again, it's one of those things that you might consider having two people here for this. I'm going to bring this over. You'll see here that it has kind of this C-shaped configuration to it. And the reason being is that so that you can see that the big part of it goes underneath the table, and then this mounting bracket goes on top like this. And then you push that in, and before you tighten this down, you can see the screws that you have here that you use to just hand tighten. Then think about how this is sitting here in the table. So you want to make sure that when you pull up a chair here in front of the yoke that you actually have room to be there. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to look at this first, make sure that I can get a chair in here, and then once I'm pretty confident that it's kind of where I want it, then I'll go ahead and start snugging this up. So to do that, and I'll turn around here on this back side, to do that, you simply start screwing these things down. And you can see here that this begins to move somewhat. You want to make sure that you have this snug against the front of the table so that you're not having the machine sitting on here kind of sideways. So this is what we're doing here now, just kind of snugging this up. And again, this is one of those things that you don't necessarily have to gorilla this thing on here. Just snug it up and just make sure that it doesn't move around on the table. And that looks pretty good right there. And so with that, we have the lower portion and the actual heavy part of this, we have it done. So one of the little tricks that I like to use is to pre-plug all of my power and my video cables on the backs of these monitors before you mount it here to this, because they're really kind of hard to see. So with that, what I'm going to do is I put this on a little table, and then I'm going to put my HDMI plug here, and I'm going to come in outside the bracket. You're going to have a piece that's going to be filling this spot here in the center. So you want to bring your cables then to the outside of that. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. So I'm going to put these on here. Here, I'm going to plug that into HDMI 1 here. So there's that. Plugged into HDMI 1. Here's my power. Plug here. So now, when you look at this, you've got your video cable is coming out of this side, your power is coming out of this side. And so with that, it just moves this because you've got another block that's going to go right here. So with that, now I'm ready to move this here and put this right here. And with that, you had 4 little thumb screws that kind of go right here. Let's secure this on. That. A little cap on this one came loose. I'll fix that later. So there you have that part. And as I say, I'll come back and this acrylic piece is going to be one of the last things that we do here on the front. So the next thing that we're going to do here is that we are going to mount the actual horizon kit, which are the other two monitors, over here on the back of the main monitor. So next comes the bracket that mounts the horizon kit. The horizon kit are the two monitors that sit on either side of your main monitor. And this is the bracket that gets mounted inside that particular plate area in the back of your main monitor. In fact, on the sides of this, and I'll try to turn this so you can see this in one of the cameras, that here you have the little holes here. That's where it kind of gets, you have the little screws that you use a 5/32 Allen wrench to secure this here into the back of your unit. But before we do that, there's a couple of things that I want to show you here just real quick. First of all, for packing purposes, this bracket, it gets fastened down here so that the top piece of this particular aluminum channel here is at the very top of this box. We're going to lower it, and the reason that we're going to lower it is because when we're all done with this, we want all three monitors, the top bezels of each monitor, to all be flush. Now you may think that this is the top of the monitor of the main. It isn't. The top of the monitor of the main actually comes down to about right here. So what we want to do, we're going to lower this about 1 inch to 1.25 inches here just to start, because I happen to know that we're going to have to do this anyway. And we might as well do it now before we hang two monitors off of it. So we're going to do that. To do that, we're going to loosen this up a little bit here. I'll loosen these. Okay, then I'll get ready to turn this back. So to loosen that, and we're going to put that at about right there, because that's going to get us pretty close for our final adjustment, so that when we're doing this later here, when we have the weight of the monitors on it, we don't have to do it as far. So it's going to sit like this. So we have to attach the wings, which are these. We have to attach these here to the angle pieces. Well, here's a way to do that. You'll see that inside these there are channels, and I'm going to turn this here into the other camera so that you can see this here. So you can see the fact that we have channels right here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want these to slide into the channel here, into this angle bracket. Now to do that, we're going to loosen these outermost little pieces of this bar, and what we're going to do is we are going to loosen these last two screws here, the last two screws here, the bottom and the bottom. So on both ends, we are going to loosen these screws. So with this, I'm going to loosen, loosen, loosen. I may need my actual wrench here for this. Loosen this, loosen this. I'm going to loosen the other side while I'm at it. So I'm going to loosen this here, here, here. Use the hex key that came with the kit here because it's shorter. Now what we're doing here by loosening this, and I'll show you here in the camera, what we're doing is, do you see these little bars right here? These little bars. See those right here on the inside? These are going to slip inside the channels of these. And so we have to loosen them to get them in there first. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And one of the other things that I've done here is that over time figured out that gravity can be your friend here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this up, and then I'm actually going to hang this off the edge of the table just enough so that I can see it getting started. And once it does, then I can snug it up from there. But I just wanted to kind of tell you what it is that I'm doing here as I'm doing it. Go on that. Slide that up. Loosen that just a little bit. And that goes all the way up there until it clicks. Once you have this here where it's fastened here on the ends, now we're just going to tighten that up. And then you just complete this, and you're going to do this to the other side. So with the Horizon Kit bracket built, now we're going to put it on to the back main monitor bracket here on the TD. Now, to do that here, I've turned the unit around so you can kind of see this a little bit better. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna drop my screwdriver first of all. We're gonna put that right here. Then we're going to mount this inside this unit. Let me get my screwdriver again here. So we're going to mount this inside the unit, inside your hardware bag. You've got your bolts here for this. So the first thing we're going to do is set this inside here, and we're going to get our first bolt. And that first one sometimes can be a trick. This, by the way, is where two people comes in real handy. All right, and with that, now we have the actual bracket here for the monitors. So now come the monitors. So now that the bracket is on, we're ready to hang our monitors. In the same big brown box that this bracket was in are the two side monitors. And I want to show you these as I pull these out. So when I pull this out, you'll notice this first one. This one just happens to be an Asus. It happens to be an Asus box. When you look at this, and I'll show you the other angle here, you're going to see a big L with a circle in it. That means left. This monitor goes on the left side, so as you're looking at it as the pilot, it's going to go on the left side. Why is that important? Because the cabling that is in this box is specific for the left side as we plug everything into the graphics card at the end. So that's why that's important. So you want to make sure that if L is good enough for you to remember that this is the left one, great. If you want to grab a Sharpie and put left monitor on it, then I would do that. So now let's go ahead and open this up here and we'll get the monitor ready. I have a small table here in front of me with some of the padding from the box, so I'm going to go ahead and use that to prep the monitor. Okay, now the other thing that you'll notice is that I have these 4 screws right here. These are Phillips screws. So you remember at the beginning when I said that if you have a Horizon kit, you're going to want a Phillips screwdriver here for your arsenal. This happens to be a Phillips number 2 Phillips here. These are to mount the screws here to the back side of this wing, and that's what we're going to do here right now. They should go, so on the backs of these, you've got 8 different slots. These go on the top slots of all of these. So I'm just going to get a couple of them started here. Okay, I'm just finger tightening those on there just to hold this monitor up here just for now. So this one, I've got the left over here with the left. Now I'm going to put the right. So now we're ready to connect this to a computer. So we have all of our monitors all set, brackets are all ready to go. Now we're ready to plug this into the business end of the SIM, which is the CPU, the central processing unit, or the computer. So when we look at the back of the computer here, there are a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. The first thing is going to be this vertical row over here. This is the motherboard. So if there are those of you that may be familiar with the J Velocities, our desktop units that we have with a single screen, the motherboard there, the orientation is horizontal. In this case, on the TD, the orientation of your motherboard is vertical. This is the motherboard. Below that, in a horizontal orientation, is your graphics card. This is where all of your monitors get plugged into, and it is very important to remember that there is an order to how these things get plugged in. And here's why I say this. Your main monitor gets plugged in with a DVI connection. That DVI connection is going to be the one that's going to get plugged in right here. This tells the computer that this particular plug is the center monitor, or the main monitor. So the next one that gets plugged in is going to be the monitor that's going to be on the left. The monitor on the left, this is the one that has the HDMI cables. Okay, is everybody familiar with what the HDMI looks like? Like that? Okay, so that's the HDMI cable. That is the one that gets plugged in next, and that is that second slot that's here on the back. And this is the cable that you get with your left monitor. And so that gets plugged in right there, just like that. Okay? Now the last one is going to be the right monitor. This one is a little bit different, and I want to explain this to you. When you look at this particular connection right here, this is what we call a display port connection, and that's what it looks like. The display port is different. It's got a little different looking plug on it. I'll try to get this over here where you can see it. So it's different than the HDMI. It's rectangular, except on one end, it's got a little slope to it. And so that is your display port. There's an adapter on this, and that adapter is on that right monitor. And so now we're going to plug in the display port. This one actually snaps in. There's a little clicking that happens here with that. So that one gets in there. It's got this adapter to it. So this is the adapter that goes to an actual HDMI. So the other end of this is an actual HDMI, and this gets plugged into that right monitor. Remember, I used the cables that came out of the appropriate boxes that we used here before. So I wanted to show you that as we plug this in. So now what I want to tell you is that everything else that gets plugged in is going to get plugged in here to the motherboard, including your speakers. The audio comes in this green port right here. So that green port is what you're going to want to use here to plug in your speakers. So make sure that you plug in your audio here on the motherboard. It's this vertical orientation here, that you plug that into the green port here for your speakers to get your sound. So now all I've done is I've set here the CPU just right here on the back in the center. There's the little platform here that this sits on. You can just set it right here. I've plugged everything in. I've got my power and my video connections to the appropriate monitors. So I've got all that ready to go here for the power strip. The last thing for me to put on this unit is going to be the acrylic that goes on the very front of the machine. But before I turn the SIM around, I want to show you something here on the actual this portion of this acrylic here before. This is the acrylic, and I would strongly recommend handling this by the edges so that you don't get fingerprints and dust and things like that on it. But there's one thing that I want to show you before I mount this, and I'm going to show this other camera. On the back right piece. As you look at this from the front on the right side, behind one of the lower right-hand FMS switches, there is a USB plug. It's the same type of that D-shaped USB plug that we use for the rudder pedals. You may be familiar with this if you've plugged in a printer because they use the same D type of plug. But this is going to be plugged in. When I set this in, there's a little hole in the back of this frame where that D plug gets plugged in. So I wanted to show you this here before I put this panel on. So now I've got the machine turned around and I'm going to install the panel. I'll put the panel, and again, remember to handle this by the edges. You'll see here, as you see my glorious backside, you'll see here that there's just only one way it can go on. In your hardware bag, you also have these little screws here, these little thumb screws, and so those go on there. And again, just snug them up. You don't have to just really gorilla those things down. I have this one last USB that has to go on here before I put the rudder pedals on. And remember, this one gets plugged in right here into this lower portion right behind this knob. So I reach back in here, plug this in. That allows that front panel to talk to the computer. And now I just plug all of my USBs, I plug them all in here into my motherboard, just wherever there's an open USB spot. It really doesn't matter because they'll all work, okay? So that gets plugged in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the rudder pedals. So here are your rudder pedals. On the back side of the rudder pedal, you'll find a plug, a USB plug, that D-shaped plug, just exactly the same as what you just plugged in here onto your panel. Plug that in. We're going to set that here on the floor. Put the cable in the back, and we'll run that up. Now I'm going to plug everything in, all my USBs, get all of that stuff connected here into the back of the CPU, then we'll turn it on. And the only other thing that I did, I plugged everything into the power strip, turned on my master power by the power plug by the CPU, turned on my main power on the top of the CPU, and watched the magic happen. All my screens popped up the way they were just supposed to. I launched a flight just to make sure that everything worked great. And there it is. And with that, you're flying. The next thing that you would do would be to calibrate this machine. And for that, I'm going to suggest that you watch my calibration video. It'll walk you through everything you need to know.